Hello, America. Dave Hodges here. I am the host of the Common Sense Show. We are the show that is freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. And for our audio listeners, I will verify with you what I'm going to show here to our audience, both in our TV show and our social media outlets. And what I'm displaying here is a document by the Cornell Law School. And they provide this public information. They allow you to disseminate it, and we appreciate that. And it's the Uniform Commercial Code, Section 8 of the Securities Act of 1994. And I'm going to back away from this for a minute, and I'm just going to tell you very, very quickly. I have been beating this drum from a different angle for years, years. But G. Edward Griffin, the guru, I think, in the alternative media, King Ed is what we should be calling him. He's that great. He's been on banking as long as I've been alive. And he has talked about this as well from a different angle than I did. So I took a secondary angle because I knew Ed had a large audience, and I wanted to show people that your money in the bank is not safe, and it's not necessarily for the reasons that you would think. And Ed has talked about this, and he's appeared in group settings. He's done testimony. I have had, from my perspective, when I talk about Dodd-Frank Law of 2010, where your money is truly not your money when it's in the bank, you're an unsecured creditor. Well, that belief that was put into law in 2010 comes over to here in 1994, which Cornell displays for us on their website. And I'll give the URL here for people who are listening. You can go look at it yourself. And they have links, and you can click on the link and start reading. Law.cornell, that's two L's, law.cornell.edu/UCC/8. I'll say that one more time. Law.cornell.edu/UCC-8. Now, I've decided to jump on this side of the fence to try to tell people you better become your own bank. Now, are all the banks going to fail and they're going to keep your money, which they can do upon insolvency? The answer is no. I don't believe they're all going to fail. But enough of them could, and branches of the big five could fail because, they're closing a lot of them, and they're closing a lot of them because they're a problem. I don't care who you're talking about, B of A, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, it doesn't matter. They're closing branches. We have done shows on this. And so you could get caught up in this too, not because the major bank has a problem, but because the branch does. And the branch can make independent decisions. 66 banks earlier this week were declared to be in danger by Jerome Powell in a declaration that was put forth by him on behalf of the Federal Reserve. Well, if you think they're going to tell you the truth about how bad it is and where they draw the line about what's a danger for insolvency, they're not telling you that. You have to take their word that they have established some arbitrary line of judgment, and 66 banks fall on the negative side of that judgment. Do you, are you really want to take a risk with your retirement? Do you really want to take a risk with your savings based on known fabricators of the truth? Do you? I'm telling you, President Trump is worried. He's not coming at this directly, he's coming at it indirectly. But he has railed against Jerome Powell, but he's not attacking Powell. Well, he is individually, but he's attacking the institution of the Federal Reserve. You're not working the American people's best interest rates. That's a small door opening up to what I've been telling you for years. I can see exactly where the president's trying to take this, but he's not trying to alarm the country. His words could trigger a bank run. I'm not trying to trigger a bank run. He certainly doesn't want to trigger a bank run, but he is after straightening out the banking system as best they can. But I do not believe that the banking system can be straightened out. Now, some of you are going to say, well, Dave, you've been talking about Dodd-Frank. Why haven't you talked about the UCC? Oh, contraire, mon frere. Yours truly has done that. Last year, I interviewed Julie Hauk. Who's she? She's a legislator from South Dakota. And I'll tell you, she's as solid as they come. Dynamic, charismatic, intelligent, well spoken, and fearless. And she was talking about the Uniform Commercial Code generally, and this is one of the elements that she's concerned about. She has sponsored legislation of recent to try to counter this in her state and has met with tremendous opposition by the banking lobby, who is lying and bullying legislators. And by bullying, we can arrange for you not to be reelected in 2 years or a year, whenever your election comes up. And we'll throw all kinds of money behind your opponent. We don't care who it is or what they stand for, but if you keep doing this, we're coming after you. This happened in Tennessee, and this state legislation against the UCC 8 declaring you to be an unsecured creditor and you don't have control over your money. And in times of insolvency, you're not entitled to have that money. That's right. They use the word insolvency here in the UCC. Go look it up. Go look it up. I'll give out the URL one more time. law.cornell.edu/UCC/8. Now you have a couple of options, and you don't have a lot of options. First, as I've always said, you need to keep operating capital in the bank. And I'm not interested in triggering a bank run. I don't have malicious intent here with regard to the banks. The banks are what the banks have always been since the time of Jesus when he ran the bankers out of the temple. And things haven't changed. And all the negative things about the banks that have been said with regard to funding wars, cleanup of wars, uniform action, supporting both sides, that's a matter of history. And I'm not going to revisit that here. What I'm talking to you about is you making the best optimal decisions possible. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. And anytime you engage in some of the things that tell you that I'm doing, and I said, maybe you want to take a look at this, I have to give you the FTC disclaimer saying that there's always a risk in whatever you do. I'm surprised there's not a risk demanded by the FTC to tell you leaving your bank money in the bank that's in distress is a really dangerous thing to do. But I fulfilled my FTC requirement. Now, having said that, I want to get into this Article 8, Uniform Commercial Code. You are an unsecured creditor when you put your money in the bank. Let me give you an example. You give your child $10 to go to the store to pick up a gallon of milk and a couple of other things that are clearly under $10. And whatever is left over, you can buy some candy for yourself. But on the way to the store, the child says, oh, I got this money. Mom's not looking over my shoulder. I can go into the store and buy anything I want. Oh, I'm sorry, Mom, I ran out of money. Crude analogy, but it fits. Once you give away your assets to someone in this fashion, it's unsecured. What are the parents going to do? Call the police on their kid? That's not going to fly. And the law protects the banks in this analogy. It's called Dodd-Frank 2010. In fact, there was even an article that was put out by the EU and the New York Federal Reserve that addresses this in 2006. Well, I've displayed the document from Cornell, and you specifically want to go to Article 5 of that document and click that on. That's the important part. The whole thing relates to what I'm telling you. Is the fact is that when you walk in the bank and say, here's my payroll check, or it comes electronically, it doesn't matter. It's no longer yours. And the word insolvency protects the banks from future legal action. And I'm going to do some follow-up case studies of where this happened. One of them will be Shearson Lehman 2009 and that debacle when credit swap derivatives became a common term among American investors, something that most of them had never heard of before. But here's the bottom line. And like I said, I will follow up with more. I actually have the cover letter from Joyce Hanson of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, writing to the European Commissioner on Banking and saying, here's a 122-page summary of how we do it here in America, how we do what? How we basically protect our big investors by stealing from the little investors by declaring them to be unsecured creditors. That's my interpretation language. That's not something that Joyce Hanson said, but in effect, that's what she described. And what I'm telling you is not to induce panic, but what I'm saying is you need to keep some money in the bank. There's no question. But do you want to trust your retirement? This is why every day I tell you about this with regard to Dodd-Frank 2010. But it's a massive bill. It's hard to unpack. This is simpler to unpack. And G. Edward Griffin really made this a battle cry for him. And I'm echoing what Ed is saying here. It's true. And it's just another description of what I've been telling you for years. And all of a sudden, I am seeing on social media sites, gee, you don't really control your assets when you put it in the bank. There's a show on Netflix, and I'll close with this. It's called Ozark. And over a period of time, I watched all four seasons, including part one and part two of the fourth season. And the main character, Martin, had to come up with $8 million or face a bad end of the cartel in this fictional story. But the fictional story was rooted in some truth. He went to the bank and he had all kinds of investments and accounts and so forth that almost totaled the 8 million that he had 48 hours to make good on or else. You know what I mean by or else. And the bank says, well, on paper it shows you have this, but no bank could ever meet this requirement. That's why they're only required to keep less than 10% of the assets they say on hand in a practice I've described for you called fractional reserve banking. And what's interesting about that is Martin says, well, okay, I'm going to go out into the lobby. I'm going to scream at the top of my lungs that I can't get my money. And then I'm going to go to the newspapers. Well, he came back with suitcases to take the cash, and the feds were there. And he said, I've done nothing wrong. I'm just going to invest in the Ozarks and blah, 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 which was somewhat true, but it was going to be a money laundering operation to satisfy the people that were putting pressure on him. And eventually he was able to walk out with the money. In real life, that wouldn't happen. Sorry, I love Ozark, but that's not a realistic ending. The feds would never have stood by and let that happen. Martin's life would have been turned upside down. Where was his partner that was disappeared? And yeah, so if you're familiar with the show, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The banks don't have all the money they need on hand. And then you'll mistakenly think that the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation can cover you. They can if you're a secured creditor, is covered by the label of credit swap derivatives investor, which I doubt any of you are. So you're not covered. You're unsecured creditor. You're in second place, but you may as well be in last place because the FDIC has 1.1% of the money on hand needed to cover banking assets in America. And the word insolvency protects the banks from liability and also the federal government, the Federal Reserve System from liability, because if it's solvent, unsecured creditors don't get anything back. I hope I've made this clear. And you now have 2 points of reference that you know that yours truly in this matter is not full of crap. And I am giving you accurate information from legal statute. So what do you do? Well, number one, I'll say this. I will never have a retirement associated with a bank as much as I can possibly prevent. And that's the qualifier I give to all of you. But if I had an IRA or 401k, I would take it out. I'd have Noble Gold do this for me. They'd back it with gold and or silver. And I would have an appreciating asset, tax-free appreciating asset. I wouldn't have to touch it until I'm 73. That's the law. So it continues to grow. It's yours. It's protected. You won't have the problem that Shearson Lehman gave to its unsecured creditors in 2009. And hold on. I'll describe that in more detail in a later presentation. The other thing is, too, is you have to decide, and I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to tell you what to do on this, but you have to decide for yourself what your cash to net value ratio should be. And this is where I refer you to an expert. But I will also say this: gold ain't going anywhere. The dollar could go somewhere, and it's not good. And you're saying, well, how can you make such a negative prediction, Dave? Are you just born on the negative side of the bed? Well, maybe, but what I'm going to tell you is factual. Number one, we're $37 trillion in debt, right? Do I have to go any further? Well, I can, but I don't think I need to go any further than that. The dollar is going to implode. Trump is taking steps to sidestep this, and I have covered this ad nauseum. I'm not going to go through the details. Go to past events that I've described in this. Okay. Second thing, you know now the banks can hang on to your money. If you have control over your retirement and you lower your cash reserves in the bank and put it into precious metals, which is going to appreciate as opposed to a declining asset that's going to depreciate. Think about this: you get less than 1% in your savings account, yet try to go get a loan and see what the percentage will be. Exactly. It's an imbalance favoring the banks. And I get they need to make a profit, but it's an exorbitant profit. And so if you have a stockpile of gold and silver, then you can weather the storm because there will be something to replace it, and gold will be at a central issue with this. And if that principle was not universal and true, then explain to me why Mexico just announced they're going to join BRICS and why BRICS is approaching 50 nations worldwide. Pretty soon it's going to be the European Union and the United States standing alone on the old fiat money system where your cash isn't backed by anything. Now, we still have a little world reserve currency status left. Key word I just used was little. That's the only backing your money has. Because thanks to FDR and Richard Nixon in 1971, we went totally off the gold standard. But see, gold is still reactive to dollar. As the dollar dies, gold will rise. Your choice. Your choice. This has been an informational moment, and everything I said to you is legally verifiable. And I would encourage you to go to our social media sites to see the Cornell document. I'm later going to show you the European Union communications with the Federal Reserve that took place in 2006, where they said, yeah, this is how we do it. And they did it with Shearson Lehman in 2009. Now, the Europeans are taking a slightly different approach. They're going after savings accounts. That's another story for another time. We have covered that. But the European Union basically followed the advice of the New York Federal Reserve author of that document, Joyce Hanson. And today they have a system in place very similar to ours, only they're going a step further. And we're showing signs in this country we're following their step further, which means your savings is not safe, even in a healthy environment. Yeah, we've covered that, and I'll link back to that at the end of this. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a choice right now. I'm giving you a way to weather the coming storm. The $37 trillion debt is not going anywhere. Trump is doing a great job with Doge, but it's kind of like he's taken a bucket of sand and thrown it out in the ocean and basically said, I'm trying to clear the beach. He has an impossible task. The good news about Donald Trump, he's not interested in stealing money from the average person. We're lucky that he's the president because if we go back to past leaders, the position we're in, they wouldn't hesitate that you would lose just about everything. including your home, which is also covered in the UCC. And that's why maybe you want to do a search on Julie Houck and Dave Hodges' interview with her. And we covered that aspect of it too. The South Dakota legislator is who I'm referring to. Ladies and gentlemen, your choice. I'm going to give you a number to Noble Gold. You can call and have these discussions. You can tell them you heard my show. They're well acquainted with me. And I have been a customer for going on 8 years. I many times over. And I have, by the way, Monday is our next target date to update what we're doing. Because whenever we do some kind of deal and we get any kind of money coming in, we don't care if it's $1,000 or $10,000. Okay, we put a certain percentage of it into precious metals because I do not trust the fiat system. And if your history teacher was worth a darn and you were paying attention, that's probably the key element, you would know what happens to fiat currencies. They have a lifespan of about 50 to 70 years. They go into hyperinflation and the people go broke and unemployment's rampant. That's a fact. That's a fact. Now, 877 646 5347, 877 646 5347. And tell them I told you to call. They're well aware of what I'm saying. And by the way, I'll give the disclaimer one more time. I am not a financial advisor. I am a participant and an advertiser for Noble Gold by contract. Okay, so that's full disclosure. And there's always a risk in what you do. To me, I think I've laid out the risk pretty clearly. Okay, go with something like gold and silver that has held its value through the years, 6,000 years of history. Or you can go with a declining asset that's failing right before your eyes with the dollar and trust the bank who the laws all favor when they're in solvency crisis. I think I've made this very clear. And I don't hate the banks, but I love my future more than I am loyal to my bank. And I'm not wanting to see any bank runs, but I do think people need to protect themselves. Now you're saying, well, Dave, I don't even have enough money to buy dessert. Okay, I understand that. And there are many people who are in that position. 27% of our nation is malnourished, according to the data. And my answer to you would be forget the gold and silver. Okay. Your struggle is daily. You need to gather food and water purification in case we have any kind of societal breakdown, either caused by war, natural disaster, or whatever it would be. It could be something as innocent as a coronal mass ejection from the sun that fries all the electronics on your side of the planet. Oh, that happened. It was called the Carrington effect in the 1800s, and it's a darn good thing we weren't in a fully industrialized society where the nation would have fallen apart right there. That can happen, and no one with these acts of God, so to speak, can never ever prevent that from happening. But the reality is this, is that you can take steps to reasonably protect yourself going forward. And if you're, as one person has told me in the comment section, Dave, I'm as broke as a joke. Okay, well, I pray and I hope that you'll find more solvency financially, but buy food, storable food, and store up on it. That'll be your first need. For the rest of you that you're okay in that area, but you need to protect what you've worked for, and you're not willing to surrender it to banking recklessness, then I've given you a pretty good formula to follow. And Noble Gold can take you home from there. 877 646 5347. And thank your lucky stars that we have this president in charge who is not interested in victimizing Americans. Can you say that with past leaders? And I'm not sure who would take Trump's place in 2028 that I could say they'll be as mindful and respectful of you as he is. I'm Dave Hodges. This is the Common Sense Show. This is, I realize, been a grim report, but it's a report of precaution. It's a report of preparation, not of panic. And we're not inducing panic here. We're just saying this is where we are at. We face 3 wars. We face financial insolvency as a country. We know the banking system has huge cracks in it. I'm showing you have options. See you back here next time.